Thank you very much. Thank you for the information to be here to speak to you. This is a conference about building the future of health. And I agree with the organizers that it's good to consider for a moment, what do we think health is? You probably have an idea, well, we all know we live longer and we feel happy, etc. But I will tell you that there are quite some aspects about health where we differ quite in opinion. And my interest in health is, like you said, then I was a general practitioner. As a young doctor, I became ill myself, and I realized that although I was raised in healthcare, I knew exactly what kind of medical facts were in my illness, but being a patient and having this experience as a patient was completely new, because in my education there was no attention for being a patient. And I had a strange experience that I had 4 serious illnesses behind each other, so I was really an experienced patient. And after that I decided there's so much you can add to the usual healthcare by focus on what you can do about healing, about recovering and promoting your health, that I decided I go on and as a researcher and study really the topic of health. And I'll tell you some of my research, quite short, and at the end I connected more to what maybe you as a designer of buildings and so might use, but I'm not an expert on that. So I will speak about a new concept of health, but I first start with 3 different inputs. I thought I'd give 3 inputs about how you can look at health. And one topic I heard already pass in earlier presentations, the idea of blue zones. You probably know about it, but like the previous speaker said, well, we grow older, but usually we get chronic diseases. Many people have chronic diseases. But there are areas in the world where people age very old, till 100 or so, and they do not get chronic diseases. They just go on and are active, and they quite quickly die without much suffering. Well, that is quite ideal, don't you think? And there are a few areas here marked, which are very well known. Japan is one, then in Greece, in Italy, and Sardinia, in Costa Rica and California. And people studied what are the common habits of these people who all have this same wonderful way of aging. And you can say they have 9 main topics, but 4 are really central. And these 4 are that the people eat well, they move naturally, they get up with a plan, and they have friends to realize this plan. What does it mean? Eating well for these people means that they mainly eat vegetables. They have you could say, not consciously, but there is an 80% rule, which means they do not eat themselves full, but they stop at a quite early, when they have enough, but not full or more, what most people do. That you could see they eat a lot of beans and they drink red wine, so that is good news. But that means eating well. Moving naturally means that these people, they're quite in agricultural areas. They do not go to fitness centers. They just move a lot. They walk, sometimes they bicycle, but they have a lot of natural physical activity. And then the fact of getting up with a plan, that means that people have an ideal, even till very high age, they have an ideal about which they remain very enthusiastic. And they have social communities with whom, friends with whom they work on these ideals. So these 4 are apparently very crucial. And it's not really immediately connected to the built environment, but I think it's good to realize that how important also these factors of having ideals, of having a social group you belong to are. So that is the first one clue about where you can say, okay, let's call that health. The second clue is the concept of sense of coherence. You may not have heard of it, but in my work, I worked after as a general practitioner, I also worked with people with war traumas. And I met the concept of sense of coherence, which are characteristics in people who, even if they have suffered very, very severe experiences still remain healthy. The sense of coherence is a concept which was developed by Mr. Antonovsky. Antonovsky was a medical sociologist in Israel, and he found in a hospital in Tel Aviv that there were many women above 50, and about half of the patients were very, you could say, crippled, had a lot of illness, sufferings, but there was also another group who was very vital and functioning well, and all of them had suffered concentration camp experiences. So this was not a designed, you can say, experiment, but it was very interesting because Antonovsky started to study what are the factors which have these people who are really very vital and doing well. And he found 3 characteristics which he together called the sense of coherence. And he said these people have comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. And what is meant by that? It becomes very clear if you take the opposite. If you lack comprehensibility, you can say people are confused. If they lack manageability, you can say they feel powerlessness. If they lack meaningfulness, you can say it's purposelessness. So having these effective comprehensibility means that you understand your situation. You're not confused. Manageability is the fact that you have the feeling that somehow you have a grip on your situation. And the meaningfulness is that in every situation you can give some sense, some meaning to the situation. And it were these characteristics which made people who even survived a concentration camp still thrive. And these people, you can say, had the characteristics inborn, but if you know them, you can stimulate them. And there are already, it's clear, also experiments with younger children in schools where they really try to enhance these characteristics, these faculties. And that makes people resilient. You can say this is the basis for resilience. And this Antonovsky, when he had found this, he said, we're always speaking about pathology, but we should also speak about salutogenesis. How do we grow and increase healthiness? And he placed this very central. So it's not about moving and eating, it's really about inner qualities or you can say psychological characteristics. Okay, that is the second clue I want to present. The third clue is about a new dynamic concept of health, which we develop here in the Netherlands. We have, Dutch people are quite stubborn sometimes, and we dare to challenge the definition of health of the WHO. The WHO has a very honored and respected definition of health, which was formulated in 1948. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. From the start, there were critics, but still this definition is, you can say, the spot on the horizon whether you go to. And here in Holland, we said, this is not functional anymore, because the situation changed so much since 1948. And we organized a conference. I had the honor to organize it, and we had for 2 days a very wonderful group of international people who discussed intensely how should we nowadays describe health. And we came to a new formulation. And there is a film which shows it, and if the techniques will cooperate, can you show it?
In 1948, the World Health Organization proposed a definition for health. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. At the time, this sweeping idealistic definition was seen as groundbreaking. Since then, the world of healthcare has changed beyond recognition, but the definition never changed. So can this definition still be considered as realistic? That's the question. As for most common diseases, the scene has changed dramatically. Back then, it was mostly infectious diseases. Whereas today, we see a predominance of chronic diseases, with people getting older and technology getting more and more advanced. A steadily increasing range of diagnostics and treatments is becoming available. Based on the current definition, people are always in need of treatment and can never be called healthy. The validity of this definition has become the topic of heated international debate. Following an initiative by Machteld Huber, ZonMW, the Netherlands Organization for Health Research and Development, and the Dutch Health Council organized a congress with 38 international experts. They proposed a new definition of health. Health as the ability to adapt and to self-manage. This new definition was published in the British Medical Journal. Machteld Huber of the Dutch Louis Bolk Institute has been working on this concept since 2010.
Thank you. Okay, this is, well, what the film showed is that on the one hand, we grow older, we get chronic diseases, and at the same time, technology proceeds so far, so strong, that with each of us, if we go into the machinery, you can find something. And if you have this definition of the WHO, you need to treat. And so purposely, it medicalizes. And that is why we said nowadays we should focus more on the ability of people to adapt, to cope, about resilience. This is about resilience. And having the feeling that you manage yourself. So the formulation is health as the ability to adapt and self-manage, and then we add in the face of social, physical, and emotional challenges. So the WHO speaks about health as a state, and we speak about a relationship. Life comes towards us, challenges us, and can we relate and find a relationship to it? So that was a starting point. We published it in British Medical Journal and got a cover, and from all over the world we got very positive reactions. But this was the starting point, because we went to the WHO and we presented it, and they said, well, as long as it's not measurable, we will not discuss it anyway. So we went home and thought, okay, we will study first of all the support, and we can see if we can work to some way of operationalization. And that's what I did that in my research. We studied many different stakeholder groups, very broad area of patients with very different diseases, either physical or you can say mental. Different healthcare professionals, different policymakers, different health insurers, public health actors, citizens, and also researchers. And that was in a qualitative and a quantitative study. And what we found that among all these people, the support for this concept was enormous. People liked it very much. They say the human being as a whole is central. Patients said, I feel addressed in my strengths, not in my weakness. I have a disease, but there's an enormous part where I'm still healthy. So the support was very great. We also asked what is more negative about it, and they said, well, this really, people, not everybody is capable to this immediately. You need to guide people. They need a social context to be able to do this. But in a way, the approach was received very, very positively. We thought, okay, we will then go to some way of operationalize it, and we asked for indicators for health. And it came out that the indicators that people mentioned was enormous, broad. And we categorized it, and we came to 6 main dimensions of health with 32 aspects. And these are the main dimensions of health that people empirically mentioned. Bodily functions, mental functions and perception, the spiritual existential dimension, quality of life, social and societal participation, and daily functioning. And below these, behind these main dimensions, there are then subtopics. So it was very clear that people empirically described health as very broad. With this 32 aspects of health, we went into back to the stakeholders in a questionnaire, and we asked, how far do you consider these aspects as part of health? And then this came out. What you see here is a graph of nearly 2,000 participants in this research. where you see here on the horizontal axis, you see these main 6 dimensions: the bodily functions, the mental functions, and perception, spiritual, existential dimension, quality of life, social and societal participation, and daily functioning. On the left side, you see a scale of 1 to 9, and people, the more they found that the topic was part of health, the higher they scored. And all the different colors are the different stakeholder groups. And on the left-hand side, you see all the colored lines on one, you can say on one spot. That means that everybody agreed that health is about physical aspects, so absence of disease, etc. But if you go to the right, you see there's an enormous difference in opinion about what people include to the concept of health. And I can tell you these are very significant differences. And on the top line, if you take the X, the widest lines, this green line, which curves a little bit like that, is a group of people who include the full broadness of these 6 dimensions with all the aspects. These are patients. 565 patients say this is health. It's so broad. The lowest line, the purple one, is the highest at the physical bodily functions. These are the policymakers. I don't know which profession you have, but this might need some consideration. And so the thing is that why I say that not everybody thinks the same about what health is. And the discussion was that the people on this side, on the lower side, these are the policymakers. Here you have the researchers. They follow clearly people who pay them, you could say. Here, the people who are on the low, they say, okay, health is absence of disease. And the rest that's not health, that is life as a whole. And the patients discussed and said, health is about life as a whole. So that is the very big difference. And I was studying health, so I ended up with a problem because I couldn't use the word health anymore. I should ask, which type of health do you mean? So I decided in Holland, in healthcare, we say, we have one holy phrase, and that is, we put the patient central. Everybody recognizes that. And my conclusion is, if we put the patient central, then you should respect this view, this point of view. This is how patients feel and think. So I decided I needed another word. I put that broad vision very central, and I took a different concept to make clear that when I addressed it, that I really addressed the broadness of life as a whole, of these 6 dimensions. And for this broadness, I did choose the concept of positive health. Why positive health? The different aspects come very close to what is described in positive psychology, which is more about making people more flexible, mentally strong, etc. But studying the minutes of the WHO when it was raised and when they discussed the definition, I met the concept of positive health. It was discussed at that time already. Finally, they didn't choose it, but I thought, well, that's good. I honor that, and I take this term positive health for this broad view with 6 dimensions. I visualize it in the spiral web diagram, and then you get this image, where you see 6 axes: bodily functions, mental well-being, meaningfulness, quality of life, social and participation, and daily functioning. Here you shortly see these sub-aspects which are part of it. And the funny thing is that when I introduce this, and you can kind of score how you experience your own functioning on these axes, I did choose it because the patients liked it, and now in the Netherlands, many other professionals say also that they like it because it shows a kind of integrative approach to the human being. And this nowadays, it functions this way, that it kind of connects things like, you can say this is the medical area, but it connects to the social and the societal area as well. And it includes meaningfulness. In many health checks, nobody speaks about meaningfulness. But this is purely empirical, how people described it themselves very recently. So this is what we call positive health, and we'll see how this proceeds. So this is my 3rd clue about a view on health. This I had already somehow, oops, sorry. The idea is that people are challenged if they give a kind of number. I ask them, how do you estimate your functioning on these different areas? And if you this is very low, if you connect them, you get a kind of health surface. People are invited to become active and they are asked on which point would you like to improve your situation. A professional, healthcare professional would say, oh, this is low, there you need to do something. But if you ask the people themselves what motivates them, they choose completely different parts. And then they become active. And the idea is that they're invited and challenged to improve their health service. So this is how we are working on this. I say positive health is about resilient and meaningful living, but that is not enough. That is the person themselves, but they need a supportive environment. And much has already been said about this environment, and that is what this conference is about. And I was asked if I would suggest what could constitute a supportive environment. But I must say, this is not my profession, but I'll give some small clues which might help. Until now, I passed these. So in the blue zones, you have this eating well, move naturally, get up with a plan, and have friends to realize this. Then we had the sense of coherence, where we had this comprehensibility, the manageability, and the meaningfulness. And at the end, I introduced these dimensions of positive health, these 6 dimensions. So what would this mean to create a supportive environment? I agree. I think that you are the main experts, but I'd just like to invite you to start thinking about that. But I tried to describe some things about which I think could contribute. About eating well, I would suggest that in the future we create environments where people can connect to food. Everybody knows that we eat too much and we eat not the good menu, etc. But I think that one of the main problems with our obesity is the disconnectedness from people to food production. The children, even in Holland where we produce a lot of milk, many children don't know that milk comes from a cow. So there is complete disconnectedness and food becomes something instrumental. At the other hand, there are experiments where they create in areas with people, with immigrants, etc., and people with low social classes, they experiment with what they call eating balconies, where they learn people to grow on their balconies herbs and some vegetables. And what happens is that people get more of a relation to their food, take more care about it. So I would propose that there comes much more agriculture near where the people live, where they have this connection. If you want to improve the moving naturally, the question would be, is there a possibility to save walking and cycling? It was told that in Holland we cycle a lot, but in the blue zone experiments in the US, where they try to make from cities blue cities, the first thing they try they change is that they make a lot of cycle paths and walking paths, because most cities are really oriented towards cars and traffic. So to promote the safe walking and cycling, you stimulate that. How should you shape getting up with a plan? I would ask, does the area where people live inspire them? Many cities, and especially suburbs, are quite very functional, but I would add beauty, culture, green, etc. So something to really take in mind what does inspire people. Have friends to realize it. I would ask, is connecting socially, is that easy? And with the growing older population, I think it would be very good if there would be structures where the different age group mix more. There are very good experiences where elderly people go to the kindergarten and where they come and read stories, etc., where these different generations meet and exchange, and that I think makes healthy. The comprehensibility. If I think of cities and suburbs and areas, I think it's comprehensibility in a built environment. I would interpret that, can a person orient himself easily? And I've seen many villages where nowadays we used to have the church in the center, but the church is not so very popular anymore, but you can make a social center which is really functional, or different functions come together in the center in a place, or in a suburb, in an area, where people have some orientation to, where they can go to meet socially, or where they can go to the doctor or the library, etc. So I could imagine that you create it that way. The manageability. I would ask, are people engaged in shaping their area? If you get, on the other hand, it's the helplessness. If you engage people and ask them, how would you like your area to be designed, that makes a difference, and people take more responsibility. The meaningfulness, well, I mentioned it already. Here comes again this meaningfulness. Is there beauty besides functionally? I want to point at the fact that as well in the blue zones, as in the sense of coherence, as in the positive health, this meaningfulness comes back all the time. In the different colored graphs I showed you, the meaningfulness, that dimension scored the lowest. But here you see that this meaningfulness has really a function in making people healthy. And if I ask myself, how should you shape and create a supportive environment for this positive health with all the dimensions, that's too difficult. So I decided to show you first this interconnectedness, and to show you this, because, and there you can, for the rest of this conference, discuss about how do you create all these different, you can say, layers, which all have an influence, and we shape them ourselves. But if we start to realize that there should be interconnectedness, because already with nutrition I said there is disconnectedness, I would have a strong plea that we try to improve the connectedness between all the different areas. Well, so far, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.